So here's what we ended up doing. Couldn't find a new carrier assembly. So this is out of a 2017 Wrangler. It was involved in an accident. This left side axle shaft was literally ripped right off, broken. I went to the salvage yard. They said, we have one for parts. This axle was already out. I guess they sold that axle. So all they really had to do was to pull 4 bolts out of the carrier, and the carrier would come out. I told them all I want is the carrier. When I sent a guy to pick it up last night, he said, I can't pick it up because I can't put it in the trunk of my car. I said, what are you talking about? It's just a carrier. He said, no, they got the whole rear end. So they cut the track bar, they cut the control arms. Oh well, I did manage to, looks like we do have one wheel speed sensor that's salvageable in a partial portion of the harness. It could be used for testing purposes. But this looks like it's pristine shape. So I'm going to pop the 4 carrier bolts out here and pull the case out. So here's the process of pulling that bearing off the side with this puller. That works pretty slick. Snap-on puller. Had that for years. And of course the insert just to keep the... So that's it. We'll take the crown gear off now, wash it up, repair it. The crown gear bolts can't be used. The new crown pinion comes with new bolts. So we wash this part up. Make sure there's no burrs on here. Spider gears are pristine condition. So now we've got the case cleaned up. We just have to press these side bearings on in the press. Then install the crown gear. I like to take a flat file and just deburr any of this, make sure there's no burrs on here and on the back of the ring gear before I install it. But the case is ice cold actually, so that's good. And the bearings are a little bit warmer, so that'll help pressing them on. So here's the setup for pressing the bearing on. I'm using a bearing or an adapter from my ball joint press because it's hollow. You can tell when it's on all the way, and that's what I was using because it does stick up about a millimeter. You can use an old bearing race. Sometimes I'll use an old bearing race, but I couldn't find one that was big enough to fit over the nose. So now we're ready to install the ring gear and torque the ring gear bolts. So like I said, I like to use a flat file to go around the circumference here and make sure that there's no imperfections. because any piece of debris between the ring gear and the carrier is going to create runout in the ring gear. Just to make sure there's no burrs. And then we're going to blow it off. Set that over here, and do the same thing with this. This is brand new, so it should be good. Alright, there's two sets of ring gear bolts on this one. Actually, put it like this. Flip this over. And it's the 1/2 inch bolts we got to use on here. And we do have new bolts in the kit. And these are smaller. There's the 1/2 inch bolts. This kit has small bolts. We gotta find them. So I did find the new bolts. They were in the kit with the bearing set, and I put Loctite on them. And we're gonna have to look up the torque, probably about 110, because these are fairly big bolts. The front was 80, and they were 7/16 bolts. These look like 1/2 inch bolts. I'm going to spin these in gently with the impact gun in a crisscross manner. That's only a 3/8 impact gun, so that's not going to tighten them past the torque. So we'll look up the torque spec now and put it in the vise and torque it up. So the spec for these carrier bolts, or these crown gear bolts, is 74 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. So that's a 1/4 turn. What's wrong with standard specs? 74 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. Forgot my socket. And I've got it clamped in a vise. Be careful not to squeeze the axle side gears. Okay, so now we need to mark them. So what I'm going to do is mark them all on the outside of the ring gear. With white paint. I suppose you could use a torque angle gauge. So basically they're all marked on the outside. Now we're going to turn them 90 degrees each. So all the white marks were facing out, now they're facing in. So we're good to go. So that's 74 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. So the rotational torque on these pinion bearings when they're installed finally is 20 to 40 inch-pounds. Right now it's about 35. I don't have the crush sleeve installed. I don't have the pinion seal installed. I reused the original pinion nut. Now we're going to try these two shims for backlash. 125 thou on the left side and 120 thou on the right side. Well, that's nice. We could switch them if we need to. So we're going to try and set this carrier in here. A little oil on the bearings. Okay. Let's see how this works out. Let's try this shim here. And there's a bearing cap with the 1 center punch mark on it. On this side, let me make sure I got the right one. Yeah, I do. Nice to have an extra pair of hands to sometimes hold stuff. Once you get this cap snugged in here, the case won't fall out. Usually I put the drain bucket underneath there just in case the case falls out of the housing so it doesn't damage the ring gear on the floor. But I'm hoping not to drop it today. Okay, let's snug that up some more. Well, we do have some backlash. So I'm going to get a screwdriver and pry this race over and see how tight that is. So I moved this case, the bearing cap over with, or the bearing race over with a screwdriver, and I can slide this 120 thou shim in with no problem. So that's too small. So I'm going to see what we've got for shims on this side. So that original differential came with 125 thou shim and 130 thou shim in it. So I've installed the 125 in here instead of 120. And that's a little bit loose in my opinion. Went in just a little too easy, but that'll still give us a starting point. Dots up. We'll torque these bearing caps and check backlash and see where we are at. So the torque on these main bearing caps is 80 foot-pounds. I've snugged them up. And there is some backlash there, so I'm going to check it before I tighten them up, because torquing them is not going to change the backlash significantly. I'm going to check that backlash. So I've turned the light off so we get no glare here, but although it sounded like a considerable amount of backlash, that's roughly 3 thou. Let's try it in a different spot on the ring gear, just to be sure that it isn't different somewhere else. Now I could increase this shim thickness a little bit because I'm feeling that's a little bit loose. The side bearing preload, that's rocking on the carrier. Yeah, I'm going to try and put in the 130 thou shim in here, because that'll move it over a couple thou, because it'll preload the bearings a little bit more and move it over a couple thou. Then we'll check a pattern. So I put the 135 thou shim in there, and that increased the backlash to 5 thou, 5.5, 6 thou, so that's perfect. So now we're going to look at the actual gear pattern and see what it was. That shim to me feels good. The initial torque on the pinion, rotating torque, was 35 inch-pounds. I'm going to measure it now, but I'm going to torque these bearing caps if that makes a difference. So that looks pretty decent. There's the drive side. You can see it's just below the center line towards the toe and about the middle of the tooth. And the coast side is a little bit further up, but that's pretty good. I'm happy with that pattern. I'm going to measure the rotational torque now, the total setup here. Remember, the initial pinion was 35 inch-pounds, and with the side bearing preload that I have now, it should be another 10 roughly, should be about 45. So we need about 45 inch-pounds. Let's see what we got here. We got about 35. So that needs to be tightened a little bit more, that side bearing preload. Need an axle spreader actually to do this job. I ordered one last night. So I'm going to take the carrier out again because I have to take the pinion out and put the crush sleeve and the pinion seal in. But in the process of doing that, I'm going to actually check to see if, what was I going with that? I'm going to take the carrier out because I have to remove the pinion bearing to put the crush sleeve in there. And I'm going to check the rotational torque of this pinion by itself, because it may be less than 35, it may be 30, because that shim went in fairly snug, so I think we're going to be real close. I might increase that shim thickness by another 3 thou, because I was right on the bottom edge of the toe, or the backlash. So I've taken the pinion flange off, but before I did that, I took the carrier out and measured the rotating torque of the pinion alone. It was about 25 to 27, so 35 is perfect. If you're wondering how to install this bearing, because you got to tap it in while somebody holds it from the other side, I don't have the helper this morning, so this is what I've done. I've got a block of wood and a strap going across here, so this block of wood just holds the pinion from bouncing like another assistant. Just a thought. And there's the new pinion seal. Looks like OE. Yeah. Don't forget to put the slinger in behind the pinion seal before you put the pinion seal in, or you'll be depressed because you can't get it out. You can't get it through there. And it takes the pressure off the seal. We're also going to pack this seal with grease so that the garter spring doesn't pop off, and put some Teflon sealant around the outside of it. This is what I mean by packing that seal full of grease. Occasionally that spring will pop off from the shock load, unless you have a proper seal driver, which I don't. That spring pops off. Worst case scenario is it goes into the diff bearings and destroys the rear end again. And a little bit of Teflon pipe thread sealant around the outside. Well, that's not really required. I'm going to use this old bearing race to tap the seal in. So clean the mounting surface for the pinion with a Rolox sanding disc and make sure that that's clean. I'm going to put a little bit of Teflon pipe thread sealant on the splines. You can use silicone. Sometimes the oil will migrate up the spline and leak out of the nut. I've seen that on previous jobs. So here's my setup for holding the pinion flange. I made this for holding camshaft sprockets at one point, but it doubles as this, and this is frickin' tight. Takes about 400 foot-pounds to collapse that spacer. You can see that it's still loose. Put a little bit of gear oil, synthetic gear oil on the washer. You can see it's still loose. You can still feel end play in it, but it's getting there. Once the end play is gone, it'll tighten up pretty quick after that, because you're collapsing that spacer. Some guys do this with an impact gun. My impact gun hasn't got enough horsepower to do this. Nope, not yet. Well, you get the idea. I'll get it done. So when you get close, you can see this is about 15 inch-pounds. The spec is 20 to 40 with new bearings. That's about 15. So we're going to tighten it up some more. Okay, I think we got her now. It's about 30, 35 going that way. And it's about 30, 35 going that way. So that's perfect. So when we're done, we should have about 35 to 40, 42 on total. So there's a almost picture perfect tooth pattern, just slightly below center. And I've got 5 thou backlash. Spec is 5 to 8, so it's right on the bottom end. It's a little high on the coast side here, a little out near the heel, but that should be fine. Could probably change a couple of thou here, but I don't have any solid shims, and without a spreader you can't put in those thin shims. So I was fortunate that this other differential came with 2 shims that I was able to use, and I keep all these shims for other jobs. Like, you need a spreader to put these ones in, but we're going to be good with that. Basically the rest is reassembly, reverse of the disassembly in the previous video. Focus. So this connector lock is broken, so there's nothing to hold it on there. It'll just pop right off again. So fortunately we do have this previously enjoyed connector that we got with the other differential. So I'm going to depin these wires, maintaining the polarity, and change this connector body. So to take this connector apart, just pry this little plastic white piece out of the connector and pay attention to the polarity of these 2 wires. The yellow one goes up against the red tab, because now to release these, there's a little plastic ear we have to pry away from the terminal. We almost have to do both simultaneously. I'm hoping I can get it to come off. I think I got that one. Like that. So I could cut and splice the wires, but I prefer not to. I can just simply repin those 2 terminals in this plastic connector and reinstall this. This is broken off on the other connector. So there's the connector repaired. Now we can simply plug it in, put dielectric grease in it, mainly for the seal, keep the moisture out of the seal. Come on. There we go. And it's locked in. And then lock the secondary lock. That's it. So that should be good. Well, it's handy to have that extra connector. Now we can put gear oil in the differential. So this is lower plug would be the level plug, where we can fill it through the top one. It's probably going to take a couple of quarts. So there's the drive shaft reinstalled. Clean the rust off of there and align your marks. You can see my mark here. It's pretty hard to see there, but there's 2 dots there. Mine's up with these. These are 15 foot-pounds. Tighten them in a star pattern. Mark them so you know that you've done them all. And Loctite, blue Loctite on them. Now I see the vent hose is just hanging down here, and considering this guy probably uses this thing like a Jeep, so we're gonna tie it up and make sure the vent is clear. I've filled the diff with oil, but because it's hanging,
this is a little low in my opinion, so I've actually filled it to about here. Through the top plug I added another ½ liter. That'll ensure that there's enough oil to the axle bearings. I believe these were 75 foot-pounds, but double check your specs on everything that I tell you. And like I said, we're going to tie up that vent hose, make sure it's open. Well, there it is, all done. Ready to take it for a road test. This thing should pull stumps, 488s. Mind you, it has got big boots on it. Man, those tires are heavy. I almost had to use a tire jack to put them on. Well, that was short-lived. Let's see why the ABS light is on. I don't believe it to be a wheel speed sensor, but there was a steering angle sensor problem. I believe it has a clock spring problem because the airbag light is on and the driver's side airbag. All these switches are inoperative, I believe. Anyways, let's have a look at the codes in it. So let's do a network code scan now and see what modules respond and what codes we have. I know we have a clock spring issue, I'm pretty sure, and I think there's a... Okay, why is that in the transmission computer? Implausible left front wheel speed sensor signal received active. Left front wheel speed sensor circuit. Steering angle sensor internal. System voltage, steering angle sensor, driver airbag. Are we done yet? Almost. There could be a wiring problem. We did put a new hub and bearing assembly in there, but there might be a wiring problem in the vehicle. So let's clear all codes, read by code scan. And I have to do that. I have to do that key on engine off. Yeah, hang on one sec. Okay, so now we should be able to clear all the codes. Let's see if that left front speed sensor comes back. If it does, then there's obviously a wiring problem. It's got 2 new wheel bearings, mainly because the bolts broke off in the hub. This is going to take a few seconds. I'll pick up when we get to the end. So it says it cleared codes out of 12 controllers. Interesting, this doesn't have it has anti-lock brakes. Well, why wasn't it listed in the engine, transmission? Where's the anti-lock brake module? Well, let's do another code scan, and this will be a post scan, and see if that wheel speed sensor code is still present. Yeah. Left front wheel speed sensor circuit. There must be a wiring issue. I know it's plugged in. Mind you, I could plug the right wheel bearing assembly into the left side. I routed the wires under the frame because with this lift that he has on there, they're too short. They've been stressed. So I routed them under the frame and tied them up. Well, I'll have to have a discussion with him and see if he wants me to investigate the speed sensor problem. It has these airbag issues, steering wheel control issues, probably the clock spring as mentioned. Let's take it for a road test. So I'm going to see how much his odometer is out now. He's got a tuner to fix the tire size and the gear ratio. So I'm not going to worry about that, but I'm just curious as to how much it's out. It's at 34.0 and I'm going to drive to the end of my road. This thing is doing some strange stuff in the tranny. truck before, so let's see where we're at. It was 34.0 I think, and now it's 36.3. So it's not out that much, because it was supposed to be 2.2 kilometers. And it's 2.1. Well, I'll let him tune it and see how it shifts and runs after. I don't think tuning is going to fix this transmission issue. Just cut power. I didn't bring a scan tool with me. It's not even moving. Well, let's shut it off and restart it and see what happens. It's going again. I think I'm going to turn around and head back. Yeah, I'm going to turn around here and head back. Okay, let's see how it responds now. That looks like second. Third. Just downshifted. Now it upshifted. I did not touch the gas pedal. Changing gear ratios didn't do this. So I'm doing another scan after coming back from that road test. And we got the problem with the left front speed signal. System voltage low. Battery voltage low. Is it finished scanning yet? Not yet. Well, I can't see programming causing the transmission to do what it's doing, but now I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't road test it prior to bringing it in to do this work. 1705. That didn't come up in the engine side. Oh yes, input speed sensor over speed. So it's probably, well, maybe it is programming then, because going from 323 to 488 is a huge change, and it may be putting it into limp mode because of that. Well, I'll let him program it and see what happens. I'll post an update in the comments. So I'm back in here looking at that. If I clicked on display fitted systems, it doesn't pull up the ABS, but if I go to all systems, it pulls up the ABS. Let's try clearing that code. I cycled that connector on the left front. Let's look at the codes again. The connector is plugged in, although it was tied together with a tie wrap, like two halves of the connector, but the lock seems to be okay. But I suspect because of the lift, the wires got pulled out at one time or another. I'm going to plug in the wheel bearing that I took off the right side and see if that will pass. Okay, so I got the right hub and bearing assembly that I took off the right front, which only had a broken bolt in it, plugged into the left harness. Let's see if it cleared the codes now. So there's obviously a problem with the wiring to that wheel speed sensor. I'll have a closer look at it. So I can't see anything wrong with the wiring for the first 1.5 feet down there at the speed sensor. Terminals grip looks good. So I'm going to check continuity of the wiring from the appropriate two terminals here to the left front wheel speed sensor, and check for opens and high resistance or shorts between wires. So here's a portion of the electrical diagram and that connector at the controller anti-lock brake system. Left front is pin 45 and 46. Red and dark blue and dark green and light green. Now it does show it goes through another connector called an inline chassis dash connector. For the last few years, Chrysler stopped labeling their connectors with actual connector numbers. It's all inline chassis. It's stupid. But anyways, I'm going to get a connector view for this thing because I can see a couple of numbers on that connector, but I need a connector pin out. So pin 46 is the bottom, second pin from the bottom, the first small one, second one. 47 is the large pin. And I've got continuity to the connector underneath with 0 ohms resistance. Now I'm going to move it over to the other one, the pin 45, which is right next to it, and move it to the other pin on the connector on the wheel speed sensor, and that one shows open. Well, that would be the cause for our code. Let's make sure it's, let's see, it's over 4K, it's over 4K, 4 million, it's over 4 million. So that second wire is open somewhere, and that is the green wire. Well, the next logical place to check it would be at that connector that they mentioned. I don't know where that connector is, where that connector lives. Why would they have another connector in this harness when it's so close? But obviously there's a break in that wire. So it's not the wheel speed sensor, it's the wiring, and specifically the green wire to pin 45 is open circuit. So I did a keyword search for that inline chassis dash connector, and it lists, get rid of this notification, lists 30. Well, let's look at the first one. Maybe we'll get lucky. Can't be far. Inline chassis dash way over there. Why would it be way over there? That's weird. Let's try another one. Standard 2-door. Huh. Isn't that special? And yet it has a connector number on the connector. It's I215. Well, I'm going to have a look over there. So I'm under the right front of this vehicle, and you can see that connector right up there. Nice and conveniently located. Great big connector right beside the rad, under the air box. That looks like the connector that they're referencing. It goes into this harness right here. Underneath the air box. Maybe we'll have a quick look. Maybe we'll get lucky. So once you get the air box out, you can actually see that connector. It's a big levered connector. It's full of mud. It's clipped to the rad support. Under this coolant or power steering reservoir. I'm going to move that out of the way. Well, we'll have a look. Maybe we'll get lucky and there's something broken wire going into it. So I'm pinning that green wire, that one right there. The one next to it is the red one. It's pin 18 and 19. I'm not sure which one's which, but I'm on the green wire, and from here to the anti-lock brake module, I have good continuity, 0 resistance. So the other end of this connector, which goes down underneath the rad, is where the problem is. Somewhere between there and the left front speed sensor. So you can pull that connector down if you unclip it from the rad support. And this is the green and red twisted pair here that goes to the left front wheel speed sensor connector. And it's the green wire that's in question. It looks good here, and I can't see any corroded wires. So I'm going to check continuity from here to here. Maybe we'll get lucky and find an open. Man. So that wiring harness runs up above the bumper. I pulled the wiring harness down from above this aftermarket bumper, and I found some taped area, and lo and behold, there's some green death here, and it's on the green and red twisted pair. I'm sure that's our problem because we have an open circuit from the connector to the wheel speed sensor here. So we'll repair this previously repaired section, tape it up, and hopefully that clears the code out. So somebody spliced this wire before it was damaged or cut. There's a bunch of wires damaged and spliced here, but they seem okay. Just this one turned green. Now the red wire beside it is not much better, so we're going to put a piece in. I wonder if we can steal a little bit, or if we have to make two joints. Well, we're going to fix this. So I got it all back together again. Connectors all sealed with dielectric grease. Let's try clearing the codes. I didn't hear the ding ding ding. No codes present. Yay. So now all he's got to do is deal with the programming, and that should get rid of that implausible output shaft or input shaft speed signal. And hopefully his transmission will work properly once he programs the PCM to the correct gear ratio. Thanks for watching.